This year, the 60 horsepower engine is equipped with the same quality types.
Since the first car was ever built in 1886, there have been a series of changes, reconstruction, and development with each era, bringing forth more sophisticated vehicles with exceptional features that outshine their predecessor. Some of the car features we experienced are no longer in existence, so today, let's look at some obsolete car features from the past.
And we've topped off the Country Squire with a handsome new vinyl roof and elegant styling.
It's very unlikely that you would come across one of these today. The wooden panel masterfully integrated onto the side of vehicles was a feature that was popular in the 1930s and 1950s. The era evoked abstract wooden designs as aesthetics for cars, partly because they were cheaper to build. The automotive innovation was called wood paneling, and they were simple and elegant with polished mahogany, oak, or some other type of wood. Some examples include the 1970 Ford Ranchero Squire, the 1982 Jeep Wagoneer, the 1984 AMC Eagle, and the 1985 Ford LTD Country Squire. However, like every trend, it phased out, partly because the wood began to disintegrate, looking worn out over time. Manufacturing companies expressed difficulty in achieving consistency with natural materials, unlike artificial ones, which were plastic and fake wood. It also appeared to be a fire hazard without protective coating, and even though the wood paneling feature is rarely seen today, it still exists in vintage stores as a reminder of how automobiles have evolved.
But style is only the beginning of what Camaro is all about. Camaro offers more sportiness this year with an available removable T-top roof.
T-tops are a nostalgic car feature that was first introduced in the 1960s. The concept of the T-top allowed an open-air driving experience. The roof panels were removable on each side of the bar that stretched horizontally in the middle, connecting the front glass with the rear. T-tops became less common and eventually production stopped because of the structural integrity of the design. It was noticed that in the event of a collision or a rollover, the design posed serious dangers due to its fragile nature. There were also complaints of water leaking from the roof, not to mention the increased noise while the car was in motion. The T-tops became optional in some car models up until 2002, when its production stopped completely. If you ever slid into the seat of a Ford Escort, the Chevy Cavalier, or even the Buick Century, then you probably remember the straps that were connected from the door to an inner latch, so that when you got into the car and sat down, the automatic seatbelt secured you in safely without the need to manually put it on. Although the automatic seatbelt seemed like a brilliant safety measure at the time, the passenger still needed to buckle the lap belt, which many people would never remember to do or simply ignored. In some cases, the motor of the seatbelt would develop friction, making it difficult to buckle up.
Problem is, most people forget to put the lap belt on, so of course they're not nearly as well protected.
And it didn't take long to realize that this safety feature was not sustainable. Sometime in the mid-1990s, the automatic seatbelt feature was scrapped and airbags took over.
Hi, this is my new Chevy wagon with flip-down seats, the 74 Caprice Estate.
Rear seats are an interesting feature that, in hindsight, were difficult to understand why they ever existed. They were regular seats, but instead of facing the back of the driver's seat, they faced backwards. Passengers would flip the booth open while sitting in the rear seat, and this was the perfect position for watching other vehicles behind and making jest of them. It appeared to be the most fun seat in the car in those days, and if you needed extra space for your luggage, the seats could be folded up to create ample room. It should be on record that rear seats were not exactly the safest, and as time went on, the rear seat gave way to other tools that were necessary for vehicles, like the spare tire and other things.
The banner. Click it. Never miss a moment.
Citizen band radios, also known as the CB radio, peaked in popularity because of pop culture. They were particularly common from the 60s to the 90s and were made even more popular by the movie industry. The CB radio was a piece of technology which allowed communication between vehicles and was created by the Federal Communications Commission in 1945 for both communication and accessibility. Some vehicles came with the feature, and it was quite inexpensive, but then there were the early days when mobile phones were not in existence. This vehicle feature was almost exclusively associated with first responders and truck drivers, though regular cars were also allowed to have them. The CB had a few shortcomings that mobile phones fixed. They could only work over short distances, therefore dispatchers and other businesses could not fully rely on them, and worst of all, they operated on an open or public frequency, meaning that anyone could simply tune in and listen to communications between people. It was no surprise when the mobile phones came into the market and kicked CBs out, as mobile phones had longer reach and private and secure communications. However, the CBs are not completely obsolete. Truckers today still use them, especially in remote areas where cell phone service is completely non-existent. They come to the rescue, especially in situations of disaster, emergencies, or just for tracking freight.
If you ever have a transmission problem, you can get a warranty that lasts as long as you own your car.
If cars were to be categorized in two types based on gears, it would be manual transmission and automatic. Due to the advancements in technology, most of the cars produced today in America are automatic transmission, but if you were to at least been born in the 1980s and 90s, you'll remember when the stick shift was the trend. The first lesson in driving would be stepping on the clutch and shifting gears. You had to change gears now and then while using the manual, so for convenience, people began to tilt towards automatic transmissions. Today, the 4 to 6 speed gear manual transmission is now only seen in vintage cars or race cars.
You've got to hear this. Just listen to this car stereo. The power's incredible. Oh!
The year 1993 witnessed a crazy new feature in automobile design, the vent windows, also called ventaplanes. Vent windows were small triangular windows preceding the actual windows in the front seat. Passengers could push them back for extra ventilation, and they were not only stylish but necessary, as vehicles of the time didn't have air conditioning. When manufacturers began incorporating air conditioning into vehicles in the 50s, they were mostly for the top-tier luxury cars, and it wouldn't be until the 60s when AC became more evenly distributed in vehicles and was cheaper that the vent windows began to disappear. Some of the last vehicles designed with variations of the vent windows were the Lincoln Town Car, the Toyota Century, the Chrysler Town & Country, and the US minivan. How did vehicles communicate in the 80s, and what on earth was the idea behind the high beams of the 50s? Stay until the end of the video to find out. Pop-up headlights were special and dated back to the 1930s, talking about the Chevrolet Corvette, the Pontiac Firebird, and the Chevy Camaro. They looked like vehicles with eyes and were mostly attributed to being sports cars. The headlights could pop up when the car was in the ignition or conceal themselves by sliding back down when the car was turned off. As vehicle regulations continued to evolve, the pop-up headlights were faced with issues of safety. Manufacturers began to withdraw from the production of pop-up headlights, and it slowly phased out. By the 90s, there were significantly fewer vehicles with this feature, and by 2004, pop-up headlights had reached full circle and disappeared completely. Back when cigarette smoking was very common, manufacturers installed cigarette lighters at the front and back seats of vehicles. All you had to do was push the button and wait a few seconds for the conductor to heat up, and when the lighter was ready for use, it would pop out, allowing the user to pick it up. Today, these lighters have been converted into electrical outlets and used as charging for phones, tablets, and other gadgets.
The power antenna activates automatically when the RetroSap radio is powered on.
Many luxury vehicles in the late 1950s came with a pointy external feature called the power antenna. Interestingly, the power antenna was actually an upgrade of a previous antenna which was always getting stolen or easily damaged. The power antenna was designed with the ability to extend upwards on different levels and retract completely beneath the holder. It could be adjusted manually and was efficient in catching radio frequencies. The power antenna hit the peak of its popularity in the 1970s when manufacturers began to make automatic power antennas that could raise or lower when you turn the ignition on or off. The shark fin antennas replaced the power antennas in the late 90s, providing a sturdier and durable solution that could neither be vandalized nor required any adjustment. In the 1900s, car keys were made differently. Car owners could easily be spotted by the way their metal keys jingled, either in their pockets or in their hands. The bunch consisted of 3 keys on a holder, 2 round-based keys for the door, and 1 square-based key for the ignition. Vehicle brands in those days resisted the idea of a single key that could both unlock and start the ignition. It did take a while to get General Motors to revamp the keys, melding them into a single master key that was multifunctional, and that put an end to the jingling of keys that came with walking around. Today, we have remote control keys and push-button start. With the consistency in automobile technology, keys may soon become completely obsolete. Hood ornaments were the mascots of vehicles in the old days, and these symbols told stories with their peculiar sculpture. For instance, Buick's Goddess, Bentley's Flying Bee, Plymouth's Flying Lady, Jaguar's Leaper, and Dodge's Ram were all sculptures that stirred safety concerns. At first, manufacturers spring-loaded the sculptures so they posed no safety threat to pedestrians, but soon enough they went out of style. Manufacturers added that considerations for wind resistance there were a major factor that led to the removal of the hood ornament. Landau roofs first came into existence in the 1920s. They were the roof coverings made of vinyl material that gave the appearance of a convertible-type model. The vinyl roofs became the hallmark of the 1970s and popular worldwide, and while there were variations of rooftop vinyl style, the landau was a canopy that covered a third of the roof from the rear. The Chrysler New Yorker and Lincoln Continental Town Car had landau designs, and the downside of vinyl roofs was they didn't last very long. They either began to rip open, become discolored, or broke completely and needed replacements which were often very expensive. Eventually, the landau fell out of trend and slowly faded out of the 90s, except for Cadillacs, which may still come with a vinyl roof today.
Car that consistently has had the highest repeat ownership of any U.S. luxury car make.
The automobile industry has dabbled in various interior design types with the aim of improving luxury and comfort in their vehicles. One of the earlier seat designs was Velour. In the 1970s, the Velour upholstery was considered a premium design, a spectacle of excellence in luxury interiors for expensive cars. The 1972 Oldsmobile even introduced the button-tufted loose pillow velour design, and it was a popular trend for the next 2 decades. However, the velour had a problem. It made people perspire, especially on long trips, and sweat patches and marks became an issue. To add to the problem, the padding also became more flat over the years due to constant usage. Automakers began making U-turns on this feature, and as the years went by, velour was reserved for lower-tier vehicles, which led to issues of image and inferiority. The material became obsolete, though the Asian market still favored velour for various purposes. Leather, in turn, became the go-to for car upholstery, whether it was the Toyota Camry or the Rolls-Royce.
Okay, see now we're in first gear.
Some of the earliest vehicles ever made were 3-speed transmissions, and they came with a shifter attached to the side of the steering. It was long before the 4-speed transmission was fashionable. Automobile concepts, still in their infancy, had a specific gear type known as the 3 on the tree. This gear shifter, of course, wasn't very convenient. The steering-mounted gear shifter was popular in the 40s, all the way up to the 70s, but by the time the 4-speed transmission was manufactured and coincidentally mounted to the floor, just beside the driver, it became known as 4 on the floor. By the 60s and 70s, there was a wide variety of cheap automatic vehicles, which grossly reduced the sales of the 3-speed transmission. 4 speeds and automatics had taken over the market as the cheaper and more fuel-efficient option, and today, many brands have discontinued the production of stick shifts and are focused on automatic transmissions.
The occasional set of suicide doors, and of course, bench seats.
Have you ever heard the term 3 is a crowd? Well, it's probably the intention with the bench seat, to accommodate more people. Bench seats were door-to-door couches that made it easy to accommodate an extra passenger in the front. It was a default design of American cars, and benches cost a lot less compared to individual chairs. The gear shifter was a lot more conservative and created ample space for the middle passenger. The bench seat provided a wide open space for comfort. For example, the 1964 Buick Electra 225. The bench seats were seen in Pontiacs and Cadillacs manufactured in the 1930s, and after the Second World War, automobile companies began to manufacture individual seat cars, abandoning the bench seat style for several reasons. They became problematic because seat belts were a huge part of safety regulations, and it would be difficult to make a seat belt for the center seat. Over time, automakers required more space to cram more features into the front row, such as a console, a music player, a gear shifter, and more, along with the other essentials that we see today. When it came to door locks in the 1990s, everything was completely manual. This is completely different from today's push lock system that secures the door at a push of a button. Even the windows in the 90s required a special crank when you had to rotate to make things go up until it fully locked. These simple systems may require more effort, especially when they get a little stiff due to weather or other factors, but they got the job done, and that's what matters. Sometimes, having your modern push to unlock door malfunction does make you miss more simple times. There was a time when car radios were the only source of entertainment in the vehicle. In its inception, the car radio came with tuners that were used to change the station. It was simple, and you only listened to whatever radio station you could pick up. In time, things changed, and the car radio was integrated with the technology of the 8-track tape. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any better, the compact cassette tapes took over from 8-tracks, and next in line were CD players with their flat discs and way better sound. Today, at the pace of technological advancements, we have Bluetooth connectivity, which is a far cry from where it all began. And even though car radios are now pretty much obsolete, there was always something about stumbling upon your favorite song on the radio that would brighten up your day and lift your mood. The high beam switch is one car feature that has moved around quite a bit over the years. In some vehicles, like the 1950 Buick Roadmaster and the 1940s Ford Deluxe, the high beams were located on the left side of the driver's floor. The foot-operated switch was initially designed to give drivers easy operation and allow them to step on a button without having to take their hands off the wheel. These buttons were oddly placed that drivers would often step on them without knowing, and they were often accumulating dirt that made them difficult to step on when you really needed. So they moved the feature to a different position. Sometime in the 1980s, automakers began to integrate high beams into the steering column. This provided convenience and safety, and you'll likely never find a modern vehicle with floor-mounted high beams again, unless it's refurbished as vintage.
And as you can see from the interior, just absolutely gorgeous. Light grey, sometimes referred to as dove grey.
Remember when vehicle seats were more like button-tufted plush couches? These pillow-style upholstery with button tufting started all the way back in the mid-1900s and were comfortable and also looked luxurious. The classic upholstery technique could be created with the use of various material types and buttons, involving a pulling of a button through leather or other materials, securing it through the cushioning to create a specific depth that sort of looked like multiple dimples. Button tufting was typically found in high-end luxury vehicles and was the hallmark of prestige, and as time went by, leather took over as the material of choice. While button tufting slowly became a thing of the past, modern and futuristic designs became more appealing to manufacturers, as well as comfort, dynamics, and other parameters that trump the older designs. The button design has become more of a visually appealing style synonymous with vintage cars. But how would you like to see the button tufting restored in today's vehicle interiors? Be sure to let me know all about it in the comments down below. The evolution of cars has been consistent through the years, from manual to automatic transmissions, and from key starters to push buttons. So much has changed, and with the obsolete features comes new advanced models with structures that improve safety, convenience, and luxury. There's no telling what features vehicles will have in the years to come, but we'll always remember these days of the clutch, the rear seats, the power antenna, and the trustworthy CB radio. They're a symbol of development and how far the automobile industry has come. Which of these vehicle features is the most nostalgic for you, and do you currently own a vehicle with these features? Be sure to let me know all about it in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, subscribe and turn on your notifications to stay updated with our videos as we drop new content every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.